Hello, everyone. Welcome to the College Football Playbook Podcast. I am Mark Givler. Got Tyler Shoemaker here again. This is the Wednesday episode. Monday, we did the TSI preseason top 10, the T Shoe Index power ratings for the upcoming college football season. If you missed that episode, I will put a link in the description box here on YouTube. It's also in the podcast feed if you guys want to go back and look. And it's, of course, uploaded to the YouTube channel if you want to go to the channel page. But that'll be in the description box if you missed Monday's episode with the top 10. I'll also for you guys on YouTube, I'll throw up a graphic. You guys can get a quick refresher, and I'll reel this off for those who are listening. Tyler's preseason top 10 power ratings start at number 1 with Georgia, defending national champs, Ohio State, Michigan, Alabama, USC 5, Clemson 6, Penn State 7, Tennessee 8, Florida State 9, Washington 10. So now we are going to get into the 11 through 25 cluster. That's as far as we're going to go. We're not going to count down all the way or anything like that. We're just going to kind of start with the top 25. But, we kind of talked about this a little bit on the last episode, how it got really tight towards the end of the top 10, bleeding into what's going to be maybe your first 5 or so in the top 11 through 25. Kind of what did you notice as you were putting this together, Tyler, just from 11 to 25 and kind of maybe different tiers or how tight things were?
Yeah, I mean, like we talked about in the last show, the top 10 was really clustered, and we kind of saw the same thing here, 11 through 25. I mean, from number 11 down to 19. I mean, you're talking six and a half points difference. I mean, not a huge gap. I mean, a touchdown difference to go 10 spots. So everything's pretty clustered. Everyone's pretty close in their rating at this point, which, like I said on the last show, I think is going to make for a really great and entertaining season coming up.
All right, I'm going to put up 11 through 25. We're just going to do a quick reveal. So if you're watching on YouTube, we're going to put up the graphic. If you're listening, I will list off 11 through 25 for everyone, so you're not missing out or wondering what the heck we're talking about. But here it is up on the screen. 11 through 25 TSI projected ratings for 2023 college football season. And these first two teams just missed the top 10. We got Notre Dame at 11, Oregon at 12. And then it gets kind of another cluster there. You get Texas at 13, Utah 14, LSU 15, all separated by about half a point total. Then it's Wisconsin, TCU, Florida, Kansas State, and Oregon State are 16 through 20. And then rounding out the top 25 is Illinois at 21, South Carolina 22, Oklahoma State 23, Texas A&M 24, and Ole Miss 25. So a lot of SEC schools in here, a bit of a cluster of Big Tens. I've got a few things I want to kind of get into here, but let's kind of talk about that first kind of cluster there with Notre Dame, Oregon kind of just missing the top 10. Where was Notre Dame and Oregon strong for you in your metrics? Where maybe were they a little weak that maybe cost them getting, kind of squeezing into that top 10?
Yeah, so they both have recruited really well. Both have extremely high 4-year weighted recruiting averages right now. Way higher than Washington and Florida State and Tennessee, who are up there ahead of them. But kind of what dropped them down was just the development rating, which is like I talked about last time. Is basically a metric that I've come up with, which is like a correlation of how well of what your power rating has been over the last couple of years relative to how well you've recruited. So it's taking into account how well you've developed the talent that you've recruited. So Oregon and Notre Dame were just a little bit lower in their development rating. Although I do think both teams will continue to take a step forward, and that's why they're so high in the ratings. I think both Marcus Freeman and Dan Lanning will continue to make strides with those programs. So I think they're pretty appropriately rated here. I mean, you could quibble a spot or two for either of them, but Notre Dame getting Sam Hartman in the transfer portal was huge. Oregon returning, like I said, Dan Lanning year 2 as head coach with quarterback Bo Nix back. I think that's a huge development for them going into 2023.
Yeah, quarterback play obviously so important. So two teams that return experienced quarterbacks. Notre Dame obviously getting theirs via the portal, but a lot of starts between those two guys. The next cluster I found sort of fascinating because I think we have the ultimate call it preseason hype team in Texas. I think we have the ultimate overlooked program in Utah after that. And then LSU, which is kind of a fascinating team for me. We mentioned on the top 10 show that, I was a little surprised LSU didn't sneak in there. The Givler eyeball test probably has them somewhere between 8 and 10, which is probably not nearly as accurate as the TSI index, but I just a team that I kind of have a good feeling about coming into the season. What went into that? Why? I guess first let's start with Texas. Disappointing season last year. And on top of that, they lose Bijan Robinson, who's kind of a generational talent at running back. And he's a guy, you're an advanced stats guy. He's a guy advanced metrics freaking love because he gained so many yards after contact last year. Like it was incredible. Like so many more yards after contact than like any back in the country last year. So where does the leap come from that kind of gets them to this point in your rankings?
So I think the funny thing is their projected 2023 rating is only 0.3 points higher than their 2022 rating. It just when you take that at face value going into a season, you think, oh wow, they're going to win, 10, 11 games, which is according to basically the advanced metrics last year is what they should have won. But, just them not being able to close out games in certain circumstances, led them to what were the 8-4, 7-5 last year. So I think they're going to be a pretty similar team to what they were last year. Obviously, having Quinn Ewers back in year 2 is going to be huge. Having him healthy will be huge. And their development rating relative to their power rating was really good last year. I gave them a lot of credit for that going into this year. So I think they're going to be a similar power rated team as they were last year. I just think this year it could potentially lead to more wins on the field, more so than it did last year.
Okay, and Utah. I think that's an interesting team to talk about. They are what 2 years in a row in the Rose Bowl. Probably a program when I think of doing more with less, I think of Utah. I think their recruiting has been a little bit underrated. They have landed some highly rated guys in recent years, but you don't think of them as recruiting at maybe a top 10 or 15 level, but they've played at that level recently on the field. Where is kind of that metric coming from? Because they're losing guys. I mean, they're losing some guys that are going to be tough to replace. I mean, it's losing a Dalton Kincaid at Georgia versus losing a Dalton Kincaid at Utah is kind of a bigger deal. Where do they kind of factor in? I know the returning quarterback with Cameron Rising is probably a big deal for them, and
Huge,
kind of what were some things that kind of you liked about Utah when you put this together?
Yeah, definitely having Cam Rising back is huge for them. I think he's just such a cliche, but I feel like he's just such a winner. Like he just continued to get it done. He just guts it out. I really like him. Obviously, Kyle Whittingham is a proven commodity at head coach. Their development rating is just excellent. I mean, their recruiting is not great relative to some of these other teams. But looking in this 11 through 25 list, I mean, Utah and Kansas State have the best development rating by a pretty substantial margin here over all the rest of these teams.
Yeah, I don't want to jump around too much, but Kansas State was another one I wanted to kind of talk about down there. So, what are they? 19, I believe, if I'm doing
Yep.
my math correctly here.
Yep. Kansas State 19.
So, obviously, that's a program on the rise as well. Is that kind of the development rating kind of factoring into this, but I guess you could argue, look, like they were in the Sugar Bowl last year. Should they be higher? But they've lost some good players too coming out. They've got a couple guys off to the NFL here. So, where did kind of they fall in your various metrics?
Yeah, I mean, from a recruiting standpoint, again, they're one of the lower. I think they're like third lowest here in this 11 to 25 range. But their development, they have the highest development rating. Utah's a close second, but they have the highest development rating of anyone here in this group. So I really like what Coach Kleiman's done there. They've got Will Howard back at quarterback, and he had a great year last year. If not for some weird quarterback injury luck throughout their season, I think they probably even had a better season than they did. And my gosh, they won the Big 12 championship, which if you recall, we were on that ahead of time. The numbers loved Kansas State all throughout last year, and kind of got vindicated for that in the Big 12 championship game. So I look for them to have another solid season.
And then, kind of hopping back to where we were at with that second tier here in this top 25, this 11 through 25, LSU coming in at 15. Now, of course, they're half a point from being 13. So, they're not that far off. It's not like, you've got them well below some of these other teams, but just kind of curious what maybe kept them from being higher, being maybe a top 10 team.
Yeah, and to be honest, I think so. This is like the first edition, if you will, of the TSI ratings. I wanted to put out an early, spring version of this, so we can kind of give people an idea of maybe what the season's going to look like. But I'll do another update, as portal entries happen, and as we find out about preseason injuries and things like that. I'll do another sweep, and I do think LSU is a team. I think when all is said and done going into week one, I think they're probably going to be closer to 10 than they are here at 15 as we sit right now. Looking at it a little deeper after we talked the other day, I don't think I quite gave them enough optimistic of a projection in terms of their development rating, because I looked back at what Brian Kelly did in his last 3 seasons at Notre Dame, and that rating would have been much higher than what I've given them credit for here, than what I've given LSU credit for here going into 2023. So I think I need to bump that up a little bit. I need to bump up their development rating a little bit, and I think that'll get them closer to 10 than they sit currently.
I've kind of flip flopped on them a little bit. I didn't really like the Brian Kelly fit. I think Brian Kelly's a heck of a football coach, but it was just kind of a weird fit to me. And I think a lot of this is about fit, but he's kind
Yeah,
of proven me wrong so far. He had a better first year than I thought he would have. He did lose a few games, but um, I thought they gradually got better for the most part until they ran into a kind of a buzzsaw there in Georgia at the end. But they got a quarterback. They've got weapons. They always play defense. So that's a team that I said I think I might have been wrong on Brian Kelly and LSU as a marriage, but we'll see. You generally don't quite know for a couple of years, but things are doing better there than I think I thought they would be at this point. I was a little I was kind of miffed at the fit
yeah.
when that happened. I was kind of like, wait, what? But so far so good. Um, then we get into that. There's not really, I guess, a next tier. I guess there's kind of a Wisconsin's just kind of in there at 16. Luke Fickle, first year, I guess these next couple are pretty interesting. Luke Fickle goes to Wisconsin. How do we evaluate that? Because they're going to bring the offense into the 21st century, and that sounds great, but it doesn't always work. Sometimes when you complete 180 on a system and you've got players recruited for one system and you're 180ing on the system, it can cause some short-term pain. On the other hand, Luke Fickle's a great football coach and they have talent. So how did you massage all that, and how did you weigh someone like Fickle as a first year coach at that program?
Yeah, the Wisconsin was one of the more difficult ratings that I made here, but I feel like them being at 16 is pretty appropriate. When you think of just like what is Wisconsin's, floor and ceiling as a program. I think last year was their floor, clearly. I mean, that was a horrendous year by their standards. Um, I really like Luke Fickle. I think he's, proven in his time at Cincinnati that he can do a lot with not nearly as much talent. Their recruiting ranking isn't great. It's okay. It's kind of just a little bit above like where Utah is. But I did give them quite a bit of credit on the development side just because I have faith in Luke Fickell. Also, again, like we've talked about, to me the quarterback situation is extremely important when I'm trying to project forward. And them bringing in Tanner Mordecai was a huge get for them. He's the projected starter there, transfer from SMU, who had a great year last year. So I think the combination of having Tanner Mordecai, who can sling it around, and Luke Fickell, who we know is going to get it done on the defensive side of the ball, I think Wisconsin being at 16 feels about right.
And I will, throw out, this might be a good time to bring this up. Where is Wisconsin's like long lost twin brother Iowa?
Yeah, Iowa is at 40, and that's primarily it's. I thought about this because I kind of used Iowa as the development example the other day, but that was actually a terrible example because when I actually broke down because we think of them as a development factory, but when I really looked at where I have them rated,
They've
it
recruited
actually
some highly regarded guys over the year. Like, AJ Epinesa wasn't exactly, a
yeah
two-star. Like they've actually at times recruited quite well.
yeah and Iowa's obviously this is no secret to anyone. Iowa's kryptonite is their offense. I think if their offense was even at FBS average, I've got them about 4.5 points lower, almost 5 points lower than the average FBS offense. So I mean, even if they just had an average FBS offense, that would put them, right around Florida or Kansas State, around the 20 mark. So the offense is just really holding them back.
Yeah, they're my sleeper in the if you want to call them that in the Big Ten this year, in the Big Ten West especially. It looks like your rankings have them definitely, obviously behind Wisconsin and Illinois. Is there any other? Are they third in the Big Ten?
Minnesota's higher.
Yep.
So yeah, so heading into the season, the
They're
numbers the
they're
numbers
my
don't
dark
don't
horse.
don't love them in the West, but yeah, I mean certainly because they play defense so well, because
Mhm.
their defensive rating is 10.5 points better than the FBS average, but their offense is just so bad. So we'll see if Cade McNamara can generate anything offensively for them. But I'm just of the opinion, as long as Brian Ferentz is coordinating that offense, the ceiling is very, very low.
Yeah, and I've been hypercritical of Brian Ferentz, so it's not like I'm sitting here with my hands over my eyes, like acting like I haven't watched their offense or anything like that. But as I trigger the lighting, but um, yeah, it just I like their second year class. I think they've got some young guys that are ready. I think like Caleb Johnson at running backs ready to step up. I think Xavier Wampa on the defense. They're going to put together a good defense. So they're kind of my Big Ten West dark horse just because I don't particularly trust uh, Illinois, and I don't particularly trust Minnesota's talent level. Although I actually do like PJ Fleck quite a bit, and I just don't know how the Luke Fickell thing is going to go year one. So that's just kind of one. That's probably there's not many instances here where I look. I'm like, oh, that would be like really diverges from like what I'm thinking right now. I think most of the time you've got a team in kind of exactly in the same range I would have them on just about all these teams with few exceptions. But that's kind of one where so I'm on record at Iowa's my dark horse, so we can refer to this when they're 4-8 this year and score like 6 points a game and lose every game 10-6 or whatever, and say, "Yep, you're an idiot. You you thought Brian Ferentz could get you 20 a game and he couldn't, or something." But so yeah, that was just kind of an interesting thought for me while we were going over Wisconsin, just because they are kind of similar programs. Then it doesn't get any less interesting. You get TCU there at what 17, and
Yep.
they just played in the national championship game. Obviously, that was a non-competitive football game, but they just beat Michigan and went to the national championship game. Losing the quarterback. What they got a bunch of guys I think to replace, losing Quentin Johnson. I mean, there's a lot to replace there. Was that kind of the big thing? Do they have like a decent development rating? I mean, their recruiting's getting better, but I don't know if it was better early enough that it would really impact. It's probably was still a net maybe negative for you and your metrics, but like just recently, like last year or two, their recruiting has really jumped.
Yeah, their 4 year recruited 4 year weighted recruiting average is okay. I mean, it's better than like Kansas State, Oregon State, Illinois, but it's um, it's lower than like Utah, for instance, just below Utah. So from a talent standpoint, they don't have a ton this year. This was kind of a difficult case too, where Sonny Dykes going into year two, looking at what he did in year one at TCU, kind of puts me in a predicament because then it's like, okay, well, he just went out and proved it on the field, but also that's a really small sample size. So do I, what do I do with that? So I kind of look back to what he did at SMU from a development standpoint and kind of average those out and put it somewhere in the middle. So TCU is one of those that, like, if they end up a few points lower, I'm not going to be shocked. And if Sonny Dykes comes out and is competing for the Big 12 again, like I'm not going to be shocked either because he's got a pretty good track record. So I'm kind of in wait and see mode on them. So I thought, 17 for like you said, a team that went to the national championship last year probably is lower than most would be, but also it feels pretty appropriate given, I don't think anyone even going into November last year would have thought that TCU was going to be in the
Right.
national championship game. So I think 17 feels pretty appropriate. In terms of it's not disrespectful to them. It's kind of giving a nod to what they did last year, but also like I'm still kind of in wait and see mode.
Yeah, and I think in future versions, like a year or two from now, I think the recruiting ranking will probably tick up a little bit for you because they have started recruiting better, but it's probably not enough to reflect. Some of it's not on the roster yet. So
Yeah,
it's going to be one of those things where as they kind of establish themselves, maybe they'll get a little more juice with the recruiting ranking. But I mean, I kind of agree. I looked probably pretty dumb for a while last year. I was kind of like, there's no way TCU can do this. Like they can't keep getting away with this. They can't like the way with the quarterback injuries and just pulling games out and everything else. And I just like, and it all kind of
yeah,
came in. They beat Michigan but yeah, I just it'll be interesting to see how this goes this year. The
yeah,
true mark of a great program is one that can kind of do what they did last year and reload and get right back in the mix again the following year. So
yeah.
see how that goes. Um, all right, Florida's losing Anthony Richardson. I'll be honest here. Here's one. I think Florida's a mess. And maybe that's the recruiting guy in me, just kind of watching what's been going on there. But I think Florida's a mess. Where are they strong in your metrics and kind of what kind of got them arriving at that point?
Yeah, so they're kind of a combination of their recruiting is pretty solid. I mean, in this 11 to 25 group, I mean, they're in the top five or so of that group. Um, so their talent's decent. And this was really more of an optimistic projection and belief in Billy Napier based on what his development rating was looking back at the last few years at Louisiana. And his development relative to his recruiting there was really good. So this is kind of taking what Florida has been as a program and combining it with what Billy Napier has been able to do and kind of finding some middle ground there. I mean, had I weighed it more heavily towards, what Billy Napier had done, Florida could be, closer to 15, 14, 13 type range. But I was a little more conservative with them just because, like you said, I kind of want to see it first because they haven't been very good the last couple of years. But so I thought 18 was pretty appropriate for them. Although they're a team that, again, if they come out and are 6-6 or 7-5, I'm not going to be floored by that.
And we talked about Kansas State. Um, this is an interesting pair here. At 20 and 21, you have Oregon State and Illinois. Now, Oregon State was, I think, better than advertised maybe last year. I think they were kind of a bit of a surprise in terms of how competitive they were at times. Um, Obviously, they're getting DJ in at quarterback. Was that a big factor here? And just talk me through Oregon State and then Illinois, because Illinois, I'm not convinced can reload. But I do think Brett Bielema is a good football coach, and it's probably a good fit for him at Illinois. So I'm a little fascinated. Like I said, I was kind of fascinated by Illinois being 21 there and Iowa being 40. But yeah, what do you see in Oregon State and Illinois?
Both have really good development ratings. I mean, these are the bottom two in the top 25 in terms of their recruiting, but their development both are really good. Both have improved quarterback situations with DJ Uyunglele coming into Oregon State and Luke Altmaier coming to Illinois from Ole Miss. I think that gives them a level of stability at that position. Oregon State, like you said, my numbers were high on them all of last year, so much that I'm pretty sure on the show projected them to beat Oregon in the last week of the season, and they did. So they finished last year great. Numbers loved them all last year. Their development ratings great heading into this year. I mean, if they had any, even if they just had like an average top 25 talent standpoint, I mean, they would be way higher. But their talent level just isn't great. But I really like their coach. His name escapes me at the moment, Jonathan something, but he's done a really good job with development there. I really like Brett Bielema at Illinois. He again another guy with a proven track record of being able to do more with less. So even though Illinois' talent isn't great, Brett finds a way to get it done. So I think having Illinois here in the top 25 makes sense.
Yeah, Jonathan Smith did a great coaching job last year. Young, kind of up and comer. So it'll be interesting to see again if he can build on this. They've been kind of patient there with him through some tough kind of programs, kind of had a tough run of it for a little while. So that's interesting. I think especially once you get past USC, I think the Pac-12 is pretty wide open at this point. I mean, I think there's probably 5 or 6 teams that could make a claim for that second spot in the Pac-12, and maybe even first, just because USC's got to start playing some defense. But South Carolina 22, Oklahoma State 23. South Carolina was fascinating last season. There were games they looked like a borderline top 15 team. There were games they looked like a 3-9 team. Where are we at with this ranking? And is it the talent, or are we giving Shane Beamer some credit here for development?
Yeah. I mean, their talent's okay. It's not fantastic. It's okay. This really comes down to a optimistic projection in what Shane Beaver is going to be able to do with his development and having Spencer Rattler back at quarterback. I think those two factors are what keep them here in the top 25.
And Oklahoma State's kind of been interesting. It's kind of interesting to see them sneak in the top 25 here. They were on a trajectory not that long ago where they were almost trending as like a top 10 program. I mean, Gundy kind of had it rolling, and they've kind of hit a wall, in my opinion, the last few years for whatever reason. But, what did you see putting the kind of their profile together and makes you optimistic they're a top 25 type of team?
Well, I'm not completely sold that they are. They were pretty difficult to gauge here because, like I talked about with some of these other teams, their performance and their development rating in 2021 compared to what it was last year are just so different that it's like, okay, well, which one is the real Oklahoma State? Like, what do I think 2023 is going to look like. Is it going to be closer to 2021 where their development was off the charts and they were a really good team? But also, they had Jim Knowles in year, 4 or 5 at that point, with the defense rolling. Jim Knowles leaves, the defense takes a step back. Their development last year was literally a negative number. I mean, I think it's the worst of anyone in the top 25. So I kind of put it somewhere in the middle, and gave them a little bit of benefit of the doubt because, like you said, they have been a solid program, over the last handful of years. So I did give them a little bit of benefit of the doubt. If they completely tank, I won't be the least bit surprised here. This is certainly not a team that I'm like running to the window to bet a season win total over or anything like that.
And then we wrap it up with maybe two of the most interesting programs, or certainly one of the most interesting programs in the country and one of the most interesting coaches in the country. Texas A&M at 24. Boy, were they bad last year. Somehow beat LSU toward the end of the year. Now they had all sorts of injury issues. I would argue they had some culture issues. I think they were a little too aggressive on the NIL front, and I don't know that it necessarily played out well in the locker room because of that with some of the freshmen and everything else. But and we've seen some guys transfer out. They've had some guys hit the portal. What is gonna save them here, and get them back into the top 25?
Yeah, with them, it's literally just all talent, all recruiting rating. I mean, they've got. Let's see. I mean, overall, they've got the fourth highest 4-year weighted average, but their development's been terrible. I mean, they've consistently recruited well, but their power rating has just been so bad every year relative to that recruiting that you're going to see. I haven't looked at what like FPI and SP Plus may have them rated, but generally those systems have them closer to the top 10. And I'm not buying it until they actually do it on the field. And honestly, them being at 24 was me being a little bit optimistic with them and giving them credit that they're going to bounce back closer to what they were in 2021 instead of what they were last year. And truth be told, if it looks like it did last year, I won't be all that surprised because, like you said, they've had a ton of attrition in the transfer portal. I know Doug Lesmerises and Shahan Jeharaja mentioned that on their College Football Survivor show, and they went back and looked it up, and they've lost. I think it was 30 some recruits over the last couple of recruiting cycles. I mean, it's just been crazy how many people have left A&M, like you said. I think mostly for NIL things, and I mean, it's just been a dumpster fire over there. So again, similar to Oklahoma State, like if Texas A&M completely tanks, I'm not going to be the least bit surprised because that's just kind of what Jimbo has shown that they're going to do, with the exception of the COVID year in 2020 where they, I think, ended up 5th. They've been extremely disappointing relative to their recruiting.
Ole Miss 25. So this is one I think I would have a lot higher. Like I look at this list here, and I keep going from like right to left on the screen, and I keep saying, okay, like neutral field, who would I bet on to win the game? And so A&M, I would bet on Ole Miss. Oklahoma State, I would bet on Ole Miss. South Carolina, I'd bet on Ole Miss. Illinois, I'd bet on Ole Miss. Oregon State, I'd bet on Ole Miss. Kansas State. Yeah, that's tough. Might pass on that one. Florida, I'd bet on Ole Miss. TCU, I'd bet on Ole Miss. Wisconsin, I'd bet on Ole Miss. I probably wouldn't against LSU. I might against Utah. And I think I might against Texas. So for me, Ole Miss probably top 15 toward the end of the top 15. I think Quinshon Judkins is going to be the best running back in college football this year. I think
he's very good
coach. I think they've got some talent. Where did they stumble?
So everything you said, I mean, does make sense. Like as you were rattling those off, I was literally just looking at each of those teams' weighted recruiting average, and like Ole Miss has more talent than all those teams. And other than A&M, I mean, Oklahoma State, South Carolina, and so on. Ole Miss has more talent relative to those teams. Um, their development rating is not, it's not terrible, but it's not like it's not like these teams that are closer to the top 10, top 15. It's definitely subpar compared to those teams. I mean, offensively, I've got them about a touchdown above average, and their defense is about a point above average. So like, you know, my numbers do like them,
Mhm.
and they're. I mean, again, it's one of those things where like they're a point and a half from being number 20, basically. You know, 2 points from being number 20.
Sure.
So very very close when when you look at the actual rating and not the ranking. So again, all these teams are just so close that you're right. I mean, playing at home, they would be favored over everyone up through Florida, TCU. Like, I mean, they would be favored over all those teams at home. So very close. I don't disagree with anything you said, but just kind of that's just the way the numbers kind of shook out here. And I really do like Lane Kiffin as a coach, so I think there's always upside there, and especially in their big games, I feel like he brings it, and he has it dialed up on offense, and they're definitely fun to watch. They're definitely one of the more fun teams here as we get to the bottom of the top 25. So I think they'll have a good season.
He is never intimidated. He never clinches up. I'll tell you that. He, he may not beat Alabama, or he may not beat some of the big boys, but he he calls those plays like it's the last day he's gonna get to call plays. I mean, he's really aggressive. I like his style of coaching, and I
Yeah,
like the soap opera that is the SEC, especially the SEC West. And rest his soul, Mike Leach, because with Freeze now in there, and NIL and everything else, boy, the SEC West would be like, just, it still is, but it just must see TV with all the
yeah,
personalities they have coaching. So I can't wait for SEC Media Days. I'm going this year, so I can't wait. It's gonna be
that'll be fun.
That's gonna be a blast. Um, all right. Well, I think we've gone pretty long here, so we will dial it down. We're gonna get into some early gambling lines in upcoming episodes. I'm gonna have an interesting episode here coming up. We're gonna be talking about some quarterback situations around the country. It's kind of bizarre. We got all these top programs, and a lot of them are looking for new quarterbacks. So we're gonna catch up with some experts on that. We're gonna talk some transfer portal rumors this week. We got a lot of stuff coming up on the channel. If you're not subscribed, please do so on YouTube. It's just youtube.com/CF at CFB Playbook. And you can find us, of course, on all the podcast platforms that you would listen to podcasts on. So definitely check us out. Give us a subscribe and a like if you're enjoying the content. And we've got a lot of interesting stuff coming the rest of the week. But thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. And we will see you next time.